Everyone is welcome here, it's time to make new friends. Aquavitae, fill your Glencairn. Share a dram with the spirit of Edmonton.
Slancha! And good day, Whiskey Brothers, Sisters, Friends, and welcome to the Whiskey Book Club's third book of Season 6 with David Stirk, the author of Pioneering Spirits, right there. Tour of Scotland's 21st Century Whiskey Distilleries. We get a good shot of it. There's. As always, I'm honored to have you, the viewer, with us today as well. So really, where else would you rather be where you could delve so deeply into the subject, into the book, this one right here, with the author, than right now. So my name's Dolph. I'm the Spirit of Edmonton, almost forgot my name, on social media platforms, founder of the Whiskey Book Club, and most importantly, your host this morning and this early evening for our friends in the Bridshaws, so in Scotland. For those of you new to the Whiskey Book Club, I'll explain a little bit of what we're about. We are a safe place. We are a home base for whiskey geeks like you and me that love to share a dram and a passion for reading books like that one right there. Now, this book, it's the 30th book I've reviewed on the Whiskey Book Club, but it represents the 4th on David's journey. So I'm going to take a couple pictures because I've got pictures of them. So let's click them on the side so you can see his books. So there's his first book right there. His second book right there. His third book, which he was on the Whiskey Book Club with me right there. And we are going to talk about these ones later. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later as well. So welcome, David. How you doing?
I'm very good. I'm very good.
Fantastic. Oh, we didn't talk about the stuff you did in the past. He's a mainstay. Independent bottlers, if you watched it, you heard all this before. He worked at Cadenhead, later became independent bottler himself, created Creative Whiskey Company Limited, and right now it's Stirk Consultancy, right?
Yeah.
Is that the main thing you're doing, apart from reading and writing and doing TV or no other programs? You're a very busy guy, kind sir.
It sounds it, but I don't feel like I am. The busyness is self-inflicted. The consultancy part is a small job, really, and a lot of it is done just with friends. So
good. Well, that's the way to do things. If your job is really hanging out with friends, and
yeah,
I think that's the best you can do. You couldn't ask for anything more. What do you have in your glass today, kind sir?
I don't actually have a glass at all. To be honest, last night was a bit of a session, so
me as well. So
yeah,
I'm pushing this. I'm on the water and the coffee a little bit more than my dram. So good for you. You're behaving, especially on a Saturday night. It's 11 o'clock for me, and I've got my dram. So my wife might.
Yeah, I've got no excuse. It's 6 o'clock on a Saturday. I mean, that is dram time. But
yeah, that's all right.
I'll go with that for a little bit.
As long as you keep the vocal cords all moistened, because you talk a lot. I don't know how long it's going to be tonight, and we'll last as long as you let me last with you. But like last time, another 12 pages worth of questions. So I got a lot to ask you. But
no problem.
You could say I'm not answering that and just go on to the next one. That works too. Nope, forget it. But let's jump into it. So we're talking about this, and it's difficult to determine exactly what type of book this is. So is it a travel guide, memoir? Is it a history book? Now, what I decided to do, because I'm going to Scotland this summer, I'm deciding to consider this a personal travel companion. So something that's going to decide or help me decide where to go in Scotland this summer. So I've already got the days set out, but within the days and within the areas, you've come up with some great ideas. And you've also helped me with the routes to take. And you've scared the bejesus out of me, because I've never driven on the left-hand side.
Right.
And with the roads that you talked about on here, it's scaring me that I'm going to have
quite a few of them. There is no left or right. So there's just one single track. Yeah.
and try to squeeze off to the side. And if I'm in trouble, not to go off to the right like I usually do. So you talk about that a little bit. What you also have in here, and it goes easily. So you've got the white pages, which is just the conversation. You've got gray, and I'm going to call them articles. And then you have the yellow, which is very specific distillery information.
Yeah.
So plan on perhaps collecting all the yellow pages, all the gray pages, and making 2 individual collections for something, or maybe just standalone articles that you publish somewhere.
Yeah. No, I wanted to separate them, and the genesis of the book was this idea that the vast majority of people who go to a distillery to tour will do 1 or 2, and it's sort of they're missing the fuller picture. So I wanted to write something where they might do a tour at Lindor's or somewhere, and they'll see this book and they'll pick it up and they'll go away and they'll read bits of it and go, oh, hang on a minute, we could have gone to all these other places. So next time, and then they'll pass that book on. Or if you're in a dentist waiting room and you see this book, you pick it up and you can just read one of those little pieces. You don't have to read the whole book, and it then sparks the fascination, the interest, everything. And I wanted to copy one of my favorite writers, which is Bill Bryson. So the style of the book is very Bill Bryson-esque, I hope. And then the other thing was the attempt at that book before was by a Scottish writer called Ian Banks, a book called Raw Spirits.
Yep.
And when that came out, 20 years ago, I think that came out, or whatever it was.
Already?
I was so disappointed with the book, because Ian's such a great writer, and it doesn't talk about Scotland. It doesn't talk about the distilleries. It doesn't talk about the places. He's just talking about his cars, kind of how much money he's got, how he can buy whiskey in cases and the rest of us can't. All this kind of, and I just
makes you angry as you're reading it.
Yeah, it was a wasted opportunity. Here's one of the best writers from Scotland. I'm not Scottish, but here's one of the best writers from Scotland, and he missed the single greatest piece of being here is here. And I wanted to bring that more across, and I wanted to do sort of a Englishman living in Scotland book, and how things are kind of funny and different and that kind of stuff. So it's lighthearted, but that was the genesis of the idea.
Lighthearted, but informative. It really is.
Yeah.
And what I pictured actually for the yellow one, so the distillery information, again, if I pull it out, is that maybe the distilleries themselves would have this information on a big placard or something right up front, or just paper. So really colorful or very durable kind of paper, something that they hand out to people. Or, I don't know, just maybe little cards that has the whole thing on it, if you let them do it, I'm guessing. Because each one is about 1.5 pages to 2 pages for every distillery in yellow. So easily done, reproducible by them and actually having it. And then they can sell your book on the side as well.
Funny enough, none have asked to do that. So I like that idea, but none have asked at all. I mean, there's quite a few places that are not even interested in selling it. So the response has been great, but quite a few places are just not fussed. You know, they're there to sell their whiskey. So that's fine.
Well, it's mutually beneficial. It makes sense.
That was my intention with the book. But you know, I'm not a buyer for a shop or anything. And I know books don't sell as well as people don't go to the whiskey distilleries to buy books, but you know, a few copies here and there will pass. So we'll see.
You've traveled, I've traveled, and when you go to a place, it could be a castle. We went to so many castles in France and Germany and Austria, and churches, anything you go to, they always have a book. They have something there. They've got the 1-pagers that cost €1, €2 type thing, for you guys pounds, obviously. But having the book there, we always bought them. We never referred back to them, but we always bought the book. So it just seems like it. And you with your mugs, you talk about the mugs as well. Do you use every one of the mugs that you've ever bought from?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And I'll have favorites that I'll. They're not all distillery mugs. I've got, you know, history festival mugs and location mugs.
I picture them displayed and having them somewhere like that instead of using them.
Yeah.
You need something.
Except for the tin ones.
If you're going somewhere, you want a takeaway. And
Yeah,
the book's
absolutely.
the perfect takeaway. And even if it's just the one pager or the one card that's got all the stuff that you wrote, that's it. Right? Back to the book. So Roy Duff, Aquavitae, he did the forward for you, and he compared the spirit of this book to works of Alfred Bernard and Ennis MacDonald. So this book, and that's high praise. It's really high praise, but it's defendable. I like it. Right. So one, do you know Roy well? And two, if so, how well, and how do you get someone to write your forward for you? Because you're making them work for you. So how do you actually get someone to want to do that with you?
I think you've got to find, well, obviously I'm friends with the people I've asked. So the independent Scotch, the forward was Serge Valentin. I've known Serge since he started Whiskey Fun. Roy, I've known since he started Aquavitae. And you kind of think to yourself, who would be ideal to write, who's best placed. So for independent Scotch, there probably has never been anybody living or dead who's drunk more independent whiskies than Serge Valentin. And then for the Pioneer and Spirits one, I needed a Scotsman. I needed somebody invested in the Scotch whiskey industry and someone who was as passionate as I was about the industry and its heritage and its future and everything else. And Roy is perfect. Plus, he's ex-marketing. He's a wordsmith. His writing's better than mine. So he should do his own book one day. But we write very differently, as you should. But a brilliant forward, I thought.
It was very good, and he's very active. There's very few people I still watch online anymore, and he's one that I'll pick up, and I always have when he has something new come up. And then Ding and Ralphie and some other people. There's very few I see a lot, and it's still him. So great choice. Very respected, I think, everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not just Scotland, but here as well. So it's really good. So congratulations on that. But unlike Alfred Bernard, you don't give us tasting notes. And I've got a quote. So right here. Here's the quote. So also, and this is on page 12 for anyone that's following along in the future with this. So also, who cares what I think about the whiskey, really? The book's point is not to show off the whiskeys I've tried or pretend that I'm a guru when it comes to tasting and appreciating them. Instead, this is a push, an amuse-bouche for the reader to seek out the whiskeys and visit other distilleries open to the public themselves. So, question one, were you worried about dating this book with that?
Yes.
And question two, you were actually, let's go back to that. Dating, what's so wrong with it? Let's just leave it.
To be honest, that's the main reason why I left the whiskey out of the books, because the moment I would have published that book, it took 6 months, 7 months to tour and write and publish, maybe more, 8 months, whatever it was. The whiskies that I would have tasted would almost certainly have already been out and finished, and they'd moved on to the next one. So if you do that kind of book with the distilleries that are so young, you date the book immediately. And I was very wary that within a year, somebody would pick this up, read my taste, and go, "Oh, I'd like to find that whiskey," and they can't. So that was the first thing. And the second thing was, and I think I say it in the book somewhere, that to have sort of gone round them all and tasted them, and that by its own workload creates this comparison, was very unfair, because we were dealing with toddlers. And, I think I say that you would never meet somebody and say, "Well, you're a nice guy, but I know you screamed a lot when you were 3 years old." And there are certain whiskies of these new distilleries that scream a lot at 3 and 4, but we know they're going to turn into absolute gems and fantastic whiskies. So I really didn't want the book to be a case of here's what these all look like at this age, and Kilkerran's the best because it's the oldest or it's got the most stock. And I was going to say something else, and I've completely forgotten what my train was. But oh yes, the other thing I didn't want to do was I didn't want it to be a privileged tour. So I could have easily have rung up quite a few friends and said, hey, I'm coming along. I'm going to write this massive article about trying 50 of your casks. And then everybody else turns up and go, oh, can I do the tour that's in this book? Oh, well, that's not a tour. That was a special VIP. Oh, well, why did he, why tell us about, stuff that you can't do? So I made it really clear to all of the distilleries, look, I'll come spend a day or as much time as possible with you, but I'm not going to write up anything that people can't come and do, because I didn't want it to be a case of, oh, look at me, aren't I special? Look at the VIP treatment I can get, when you wouldn't get that if you turn up yourself. And I've been to places where that's been the case, where somebody said, oh, I had a fantastic tour at such and such. Well, they did, because they knew the owner or whatever. You turn up, you get the bus tour, the video, the single dram at the end, and you're kicked out because they're waiting for the next group. And you can feel a bit left down. So I really did. I hope with the book I tried to make it what people's experiences will be when they go, more than here's me swanning about pretending I'm some sort of VIP. So yeah, they're the two main reasons why I kept the whiskey out of the book. It would be fun maybe in 10 years to go back and revisit when all of these guys have got core ranges, and then do a tasting and say, well, I remember when you were 3 and you were kicking and screaming, and now look at you at 12 when you're refined and beautiful and all these other things. So,
and that was my next question. It was going to be, how good is your memory, and would you be able to recall what it was 10 years from now, or 5 years, or whatever it is? Because if you had the new make, and this is what this is why I love more than anything else, going to a distillery and trying the new make and trying the whiskey themselves. And I'm able to do that quite a bit here in Canada. So the new distilleries that are around me. So I've gone to probably about, 15 of them in my province in BC beside us. I always ask to try the new make. I love it. And they'll bottle a little bit for me. So I've got some make bottles that are just waiting for them to be at a point that I think it's going to be where they're going to have a core range, where there's something that they're proud of over a period of time. Right. So will you have anything like that? Did you write down notes of what the new make is like, or what their very first single malts were at the time?
No, and again, probably because not all of them offer it. So I would have had to specifically had to ask. And I think one of the quotes you took out was this thing about new make as well. I've never been one to judge a distillery by its new make. Okay. The joke of Springbank is it makes one of the worst new makes, but it's one of the best whiskies. And there are some other people who make lovely, delicious new make, and yet the whiskey's not as good.
They wreck it somehow.
So I don't know. I view it as the modeler's clay before they've chipped away the stuff that makes it, interesting. And I don't get geeky over that kind of stuff. So I'll leave that to people who are really, Serge is far better at things like that than I am, and more privy to these things. And I didn't want it to be a book about what the new make was about, because the distilleries I chose were all distilleries. They're all Scotch whiskey distilleries, and of course that meant they had to be 3 years or older. So the new make part of it is already an old story because they're now whiskey distillers. I could do another book on the new distilleries that haven't got whiskey yet because they've just got new make. But part of this was,
well, and you wanted to limit it too, right? You wanted to have something that was workable, and 25 is still a good number.
Yes, definitely.
So we have books like this. So this one, so David Nicurgo, Blair Phillips did this, 200 distilleries. And did you think of books like this? I don't know if you've read this one specifically, or books like this when creating yours. Was there anything that kind of...
Not really. We've got the Ian Buxton's like 1001 whiskies to try, or is it Dominic Roscoe's 1001 whiskies to try before you die, and all those kind of things. Yeah. The slight issue with that is not all of the distilleries are reachable. You can't go visit Inchderny, for instance. So you can't visit Darfmill. So I already would have had a book that says, here's the distilleries you can visit, and out of those, here's the ones you should. So originally I wasn't going to include Inchderny and Darfmill, but I realized you just can't do you can't do a book called Pioneering Spirits and not have Francis Cuthbert in there or Ian Palmer. So that was the end of that pretty quick.
All right. When I interviewed you for this book, right there, one of my first questions was, were you going to revisit this book? Right there, The Rise and Fall of the Whiskey Capital of the World. And you didn't call it. I said maybe you should call it The Rise and Fall and Rise Again. But to my surprise and my pleasure, you are rewriting it. You're doing right there. So
and I nearly
took your decision to revisit it. And how long have you been working and focusing on this book? Because I thought you were going to write a book about the history of World War II and how that changed the whiskey industry. That was my thought. If someone was going to ask me what I thought you were going to write next, I thought it was going to be something like that. That
was my plan. To do that, though, I still need access to certain things that at the moment I can't quite get into.
Okay.
But I mean, physically get into, not that I can't talk about them. I just physically can't get into the places to get all that information. And I'm not a trained historian, so there's gaps in my knowledge about how you access archives and resources and things like that. But I started on the Campbelltown, the rewrite, and it's a completely new book, completely. I started on that almost as soon as Pioneering Spirits was finished. So
okay. And again, there's the original, and I think people should still pick it up
if they can find it.
Royalties from this too, right?
And, well, it's been out of print for years and years. In fact, I don't think it's been printed for maybe as many as 10 years. So it's been out for a very, very long period of time. It was published in 2005, so it's 20 years since it came out.
I've been looking for it myself, and you're a book collecting guy as well, so you would probably know where to pick it up in Scotland in certain places, but
the only place I've seen Alberta, that's it. Yeah. Well, to be honest, the new one will supersede it completely. So the one you put up is this one, and it's about 45,000 words.
Okay.
I'm already at 96,000. So ignore that one. Wait for, and plus that's like £35 at auction. The new one that's coming out, it should be 25. So
excellent. It's a deal.
Yeah.
Save some money. Get that one right there. And as well, if anyone's following you on Facebook, this post came out mid-January, I think, where you were doing the crowdfunding for that book. So still available. Get on there. Order your book.
Yep, get on there. Yep, indeed.
And you do ship it everywhere. So
yeah. From the experience before, shipping books isn't a problem. Doesn't seem to be an issue. So happy to ship all over the world, pretty much.
And let's talk about the writing process a little bit for you, because I don't think I asked you this the first time I interviewed you. Are you a person that talks through a book with somebody else? Like when you have an idea and then you talk through the book, talk through what you think the layout's going to be, the artwork, etc. Or are you kind of a solitary kind of guy, get it all figured out and then you present it to someone later, maybe?
Yeah, the latter. I'll have an idea, and then as I'm writing, I tend to find that bit there stands alone, or that bit there needs to turn into something else. So the last three books will all be very, very different, because Independent Scotch most of it was a personal journey, talking about how an independent bottler started and then finished. That was chronological. That was quite easy to write because I was just literally picking bits out of it that I thought were interesting and told a story. The Pioneering Spirits one, as I wrote that, I realized I had these little pieces that was used called articles that I could have as standalone, and I thought they're great because people can pick up and read it. And if someone's got it in the toilet, they can read one of these articles in no time. And as I wrote that developed and changed, and stuff dropped out and stuff came in. With the Campbelltown one, that was all about amassing information first, and then sitting down and then working out how it would fit into chapters. And some of it is chronological, some of it isn't. because I had to tell the story of this, which meant pulling it out of the timeline, and I had to tell the story about them, which meant pulling them out of the timeline, and then I didn't want to tell anything really before the industry started in 1817. So I've pulled all from the old book. In fact, if you get the old one, you'll get more about the old Kintyre.
Okay.
I've pulled all that out. I more or less start my story in 1817 with the first distillery, because of all the new information that's available. So that's taken a lot of time because of the huge amount of resources I've now got to sit down and chop and change. But it's a lot of discussion with myself as I'm going through it. I'm not really talking to anybody else. There's no editor or publisher. There's no guiding hand. I'm just sitting down and working out where things will go. And it's chopped and changed quite a bit, but it falls into place, and then you can work your seam through it. And anybody who picks up the new book will think, well, that's slightly out of time there, but I can see why you've done it, because you have to tell, like the demise of Campbelltown, you'd think that would just be one period, one year. It isn't. It's actually the first 28 years of the 20th century. So to tell that story from 1900 to 1928 wouldn't work as it does where I've got a chapter that talks about really what happened, and that pulls it out of the timeline a bit, and then you'll find that you'll pick it up. Oh, I see. So it dropped production here and these other things. So they're all three books, very, very different challenge in writing, and working on the material. Very, very different. But yeah, it's me to answer your question.
You don't have an editor, but someone does help you with this. So who would be the people? See, I would usually say my wife, because she is my biggest critic other than myself. Right. And it's good and bad, but it puts a stress on a relationship when you have something. When I did my thesis and having my wife reading through that those 2 weeks of reading it with my wife was more painful than writing the thesis itself. So it made it infinitely better. But I'm wondering who you trust with that.
Well, I talk a lot to my wife, but she's not interested in the whiskey world. So things that are whiskey related, whiskey specific, become difficult. But for each book, I've had different people helping me. Although certainly Independent Scotch and the Distilleries of Campbelltown have been very lucky that I can call Ian Russell a friend, and he is a lifelong historian of the Scotch industry. For all those people who read scotchwhiskey.com, he's written a lot of stuff on there. He's retired now, and he's as brilliant as ever. So I'll send him stuff. And then people will pop into my head for different things. So in this book, I've reinterpreted the Bernard bit. In my previous book, I just reprinted all of it because there was nothing contemporary. So there was nothing to talk about. For this one, I've reinterpreted and I've told it more as a story. I've actually tried to make it a little bit funny in times as well, because Bernard's writing is as dry as the Sahara Desert. So I've tried to reinvigorate it, and I got a friend, Mark Davidson, who, again, fantastic whiskey historian. He runs the Royal Mile Whiskey Shop. I got him to read it. I've known him 20 odd years. And I have, for this book, I have my mother's editing it, so she's making sure that it reads okay and everything. She's phenomenally quick, despite being 77 or whatever she is. She's amazing. So there'll be a new editor in this. But yeah, I bounced stuff off of people. Mark and Kate Watt, the Campbelltown, hugely helpful for this book. Mark and I chat all the time, and I'll tell him stuff, and he'll say, "Oh, that's a great idea, but how about going down this route?" And Kate's knowledge of Campbelltown's fantastic as well. So I'll use different people for different things, definitely, and bounce stuff off. And I'm always boring my dad to tears with what I'm up to as well, and he's a good listener. So yeah.
Good to have friends and family on board with you.
Yes. Nice. This world is who you know, not what you know. I'm not a particularly brainy chap, but I know some pretty brainy people, so that helps.
Nice. When considering your last book and this one, we can see several similarities. So you say they're very different from each other, but the writer's voice comes out through them. And one thing is your focus on risk takers in the industry. And I'm guessing it's safe to say that these are the types of people that you admire or you think you are or you'd like to be? Could I say that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you're right. All three, definitely. Yeah. The whole point of, I mean, the title that I came up with the title before anything else, Pioneering Spirits, and I wanted it to be about these complete wackos who would build a distillery, you know. And I have the article about how insane you have to be to build a distillery, and they're all phenomenally forward-thinking people. They're hardworking, they're driven, and it's amazing how often, you know, I say, like Alistair Day, I constantly tell him he's the most hardworking person in the industry. He goes, "Oh no, I don't think so." I said, from the outside you are, but Alistair, you know, you don't see it because you're doing what you love. You know, this is who you are. You have to do it. You have to climb that mountain, whereas many people don't. It's hugely inspiring, and they're hugely fantastic people to be around, to talk to listen to. All have different reasons for doing it. All have different personality types and traits, and that was, I wanted to get as much of that across in the book as anything else. That these distilleries are run by people. I mean, you can pinpoint the individuals behind them. The ones I left out, you can't. They're not pioneering. They're factories. They're you know, they're places of manufacture. There's no romance at all, and romance is a really crucial word for this industry and these people and places.
You need the link. You need something to draw you there, as opposed to the hundreds of other places you could possibly go. No,
I don't think anybody drives by Rose Isle Distillery and falls in love. But I'm pretty sure everybody who goes to Nickneen or Lindor's leaves a little piece of their heart there, or fills a piece of their heart from it, you know. Definitely not Dalmunuk, definitely not Elsa Bay. You know, these are big, dirty factories made for a purpose, and they are not pioneering, and in no way do they pretend to be. So I'm not insulting them here. That, you know, they are what they are.
That's what we meant to do. We're here to make money, and that's what we're going to do.
That's what we set out for. That's what we achieved.
And the other thing comes out in your books, your sense of humor. So what I was looking for was another Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy quote. So in the first one, I got to get your books in order. I got too many here. So in this one, it was, "Thanks for the groundbreaking work. We'll take it from here." And in this one, on page 175, it's, "Thanks for all the hard work. We'll take it from here." So it's just like, "Thanks for all the fish." And
I'm glad you got the reference there.
Well, I was looking for it, and I found it. The first, when I was reading this, it just came up. It popped up, and I could hear them and the movie as well, because I watched the movie again just recently after you said that. It made me think of it. So I should say I reread the book, but I didn't. I rewatched the movie. It makes me happy. But the sense of humor is there, and sometimes it's not dry. But you have to catch it. You have to look for it sometimes, and within the writing. And one example, I'm going to throw up a quote. So right here, and I'm going to butcher these words. I'm very sorry, but Clachan, yeah, I
think you're right the first time.
All right, is a small village or hamlet, according to Brookletty Distillery, who previously used the phrase in their marketing, "Clachan a coin."
A coin, I think. Clachan a coin. Okay. But somebody will correct me.
And me, hopefully, translates to "the dog's bullocks." So we could have just ended there, and it would be funny and just a slight bit. But then the personality comes in, and you bring the funniness even further. So in reality, Clachan in this use means stones. So you think you're just explaining yourself, and then you give us the punchline. It is unknown where the Gaelic people ever referred to their pets' genitals, and it's just the further you think it's funny, and then you explain, and then you give the punchline afterwards, which I thought was great. That's page 55.
That's me trying to beat Bill Bryson. That's me being dry. It is this. I love this idea that we've got the original Gaelic speakers going around naming the genitals of the animals. But Burkladdy felt it was, worthwhile to call it. It's the dog's bollocks. But I'm not having to go at them because I know the guys who started Burkladdy, and in fact, Gordon Wright's a good friend, and we all loved it because they took what was a really stuffy industry and they said, "Nah," in a kind of Cockney English way, "Nah, mate, it's the dog's bollocks," and that's where it comes from. So it's the best. It's what was I think the origin of the phrase is if the dog had a pig pair, he was a butcher's dog, so it was the dog's bollocks, something like that. Anyway, but we loved it because we loved their fresh take on the industry, and a lot of the work they started has been taken on by these new distilleries who don't take themselves, some of them don't take themselves too seriously. I mean, the good example is Glenmorangie have just done that Harrison Ford ad. Have you seen that? He's got the kilt and he's out in the Highlands.
I was told to look it up, and I did.
Yeah. And immediately we had 2 or 3 of the other distilleries getting somebody to put a kilt on and going out in their garden or whatever with the dram and saying, "I'm not Harrison Ford, but look at the dram I've got," that kind of thing. And that all harks back to the companies like Burkladdy and others who said, this industry sells a hedonistic product. Let's have fun with it. Let's, it should be fun. And so I wasn't having to go at them. But I was trying to be Bill Bryson.
And same thing, there's books that are just like that, where it's informational and you get the information and you don't really get an author's voice through it in them. So this one you do, and I like it. And although very different, your writer's voice is coming through, so I can hear your voices as I'm reading the pages. But I'm wondering where the hubris comments come from. So is this something that just flows out as you're writing initially, or is it in your editing process? You go back and you remember something and you throw a joke in there, or you're thinking it's getting a little bit heavy. Let's.
It's a mix. Yeah, it's a mix. The one line that made me laugh, out loud, came to me, I think, about 6 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
Because what happens is when I'm writing a book, I become insane about it, and my wife will tell you that. In fact, if you looked at my office right now, it is covered in books, maps, because I deep dive whatever I'm doing.
Yep. And
it's the line when I'm in Campbelltown and I stumble across the people in my doorway, fondling. And I think it's something to do with my dog looking at me after it discovered me on the toilet. So I won't give the line away, but these things come in. And sometimes I'll hear somebody say something in a pub, and as I'm writing it, I'll realize, hang on a minute, I didn't realize at the time how ludicrous that statement was and things like that. There you go. Yeah. Brilliant.
Oh, I didn't want to keep going. Sorry, I just wanted to throw.
So now you have to see. I think Lindor's did one. Did Ardner Merkin do one? I can't remember, but a few distilleries took the mick out of it. But
that's perfect, and he's got a great look. He's almost a kind of a Scottish look to him as well in the face.
Yeah. He's a good-looking guy.
They did well for that.
He's the man we all wanted to be. Han Solo.
Yes, and if I look as good as him when I'm. What is he now? I think he's in mid 70s or high 70s. So I'll be really happy if we do.
Especially with the amount of whiskey.
Maybe not with the amount I drink. So now you've chosen distilleries that produce exactly what I love, and you describe them like this. So let's throw another quote. Here we go. These 21st century whiskeys will be made by fanatics, for fanatics, and in a way that pleases the fanatic. A new style of open door marketing with no laboratories, no white coats, small batch production, single cask, plenty of cask experimentation. This new breed of distiller is an extension of the independent bottler who wanted to show the alchemy and palate of the Scotch whiskey world. They are a new group of passionate whiskey makers making a niche product for the specific consumers. That's page 17, right in the beginning. And I think this would be a great time to explain why you chose these distilleries. So you gave us an inkling when you were talking about the owners themselves, but where were the distilleries that didn't fit this description? So which ones came to the forefront? You explained a couple that you put to the side. Were these just places you wanted to travel to initially? Because you're going to have fun. You're making your trek to different parts at different times of the year. Maybe you just wanted to go to this one place. You've always wanted to go to the outskirts or something. And were there distilleries that didn't respond to you? And it's like, fuck them. Forget them. You're not going in my book. You're not talking about me.
Yeah, screw you. Don't you know who I am? Screw you. Well, I had a sort of criterion, and it was that the idea really was that I was very privileged to have worked at Kilkerran Glengyle when it was built. So I was there the day it made the first spirit, and I happened to be there on the day it turned 20. So I figured I had, for the new distilleries, for this pioneering spirits, they had to have been built obviously in the 21st century, and I wanted them to have released whiskey. So they had to be at least 3 years and older. There's sort of one cop-out in there, which is Eden Mill, but I wanted to include them because by the time the book, well, they were supposed to have been built by the time the book was out. Mm-hmm. So that ruled out the multitude of distilleries that were being built, that had been built, that wouldn't be releasing whiskey for a number of years or a period. Those that had been built and built stocks and still weren't releasing whiskey. And it kept the number down to a manageable number, because it could have been 40 or 50 distilleries, mm-hmm. which just felt too many for the book. Plus, it would have been quite disappointing for me to have turned up to a building site. I could have talked through the project, but again, Eden Mill breaks the mold on that. But so that was my criterion. The one that didn't come back to me, funnily enough, was Falkirk. So I had intended to include them because they'd released whiskey, they'd been built, and I reached out and I reached out and I reached out and I got zip. So for whatever reason, they didn't want to be involved. Oh, there were two, sorry. Boningtons didn't want to be involved as well. I think for fear of people turning up to the distillery, because they make quite clear it's not open to the public. And I think for fear of me writing it up as if you can rock up. Okay. So Boningtons and Falkirk were the two that refused. Well, one didn't talk to me and one didn't want to be involved. And that kept it to a lovely 25. And as I said, I ignored the factories because they don't fit the pioneering spirit. You know, if I'd included Rosal into a book called Pioneering Spirits, I want taking out and shooting. That's nothing against, because I've drunk the Rosal. It's very good whiskey. It's very, very nice whiskey. So it's nothing against the distillery. It just doesn't fit. As I said, you can't add that word romance to Dalmunach. As beautiful as the distillery is, you can't say what a romantic place this 10 million litre or 19 million litre distillery is.
That's the Chivas Brothers one, yeah?
Yeah. Built on the old Side Imperial. You know, if you go to Darth Mill, you can't, but let's say you're lucky one day and you get to go and you meet Francis. Now that's a romantic place. That's not that Francis is romantic in the slightest, but he's a proper farmer, Francis. He's maybe romantic to his wife. I've not met her, but yeah,
the whole everything, getting to know them, and that's the romantic part of it. I can agree with that. Okay, so no Diageo for you.
Not in this book. No, they can't really be. You can't really call them pioneering. I'm afraid. They like to buy a
long time ago, maybe, but
maybe a long time ago. Yeah.
Something else that I really appreciate was you're mentioning pubs, and I have to thank you because my wife and I will be eating probably at pubs often enough on travels there, because they're open later. And when we wheel into some town, inevitably the pub will be open, whereas the restaurants might not, or it's a Monday and they're not. So thank you for that. Did you ever consider writing a book about pubs? And maybe because you also talk about golf courses and forgetting your clubs, and you should have brought your clubs. So maybe the combination of golf course, pubs, get away from whiskey if you feel like it for a 6-month trek through Scotland, and write it off because it would be a business expense. I think it'd be fun.
I think I'd need a sponsor for that. That would the golf courses alone would cost thousands. So yeah, I would love to. That would be a fun book to write. And there are we are very blessed with so many great bars. Just in Glasgow alone, with great owners too. You know, my two favorites, the Bonaccord and the Pot Still, and Frank at the Pot Still, the whole family of the Murphys at the Pot Still, and Tam at the Bon Accord. You know, wonderful, wonderful people. And as I say in the book, these places are an extension of them. It's a peek into their living room, and it would be amazing. We have lost, sadly, some truly unique places. The Fiddick Side Inn, I think it's called, up in Dufton and places like that. But we still have
COVID, essentially.
Yeah, it was more or less then, yeah. And pubs are still dying a horrible death at the moment because the whole that whole sector's going down. People are just not drinking as much, and they're not going out as much. But yeah, I would need.
Well, I thought about doing that for Canada, going pub to pub to pub, and not pub to pub. Sorry, let's change that. I wanted to do this with whiskey bars in Canada. Which ones are the best in each large city? And it's a great idea for me because I get to go to these places, but it's prohibitive because of the distances. Because how am I going to get to, well, I go to Toronto, I do go to Montreal, Vancouver, but then you still have to make it to the other ones on the interior that's still 2,000 kilometers away in Winnipeg or other places. So I wanted to do it. I can't see me doing it. Maybe at retirement. Maybe that'll be my first year of retirement. That'd be good. Then write my first book because I've always wanted to do that. What makes a good pub for you? Let's get off topic a little bit. What made them a good pub? Or when you walk into the pub, what turns you away? Where you walk in and say, nope. And
that's easy. If they're too bright, that's a big no-no immediately. If it's like walking into a tanning salon, you know.
Okay.
If the gantry is all major brands, if you walk in and it's Tennant's, Guinness, some Spanish thing that's made over here, something else, and then an IPA,
or whatever.
That's it. You know, that's as dull as dishwater. If they can't be bothered to get in a couple hand pumps, you know, for people who actually drink beer,
nice.
And if they call themselves, I'll never forget. I went to a birthday party in York, and this isn't even that long ago, and the pub said specialist whiskey bar, and I swear they had 6 whiskeys. That was it. And Glenfiddich, Balvenie, Pulteney, and nothing against those whiskies, but you can find them everywhere, you know. And this was a special. And I remember asking them, I said, "So where's your whiskey bar?" Well, that's it, you know, all 6 of them.
You sure you don't have a hidden section somewhere? the knock, and I go to a special.
That's a big turn off too. Yeah, and if they serve it to you in just a half pint glass or something, you know, or just a huge glass, and they don't have a Glencairn at the very least, something like that. Big turn off. Exactly. Yeah. But mainly it is the beer thing. You can just tell. You walk in and it's 4 brands, and they're the 4 brands you can find in the co-op. If they haven't bothered to get something handmade, a decent beer. You know.
I agree with all of that, especially the beer, because I brew my own, but I always look for the micro breweries. But the light, I didn't even think of that, to tell you the truth, walking in and being too bright. And it's true.
Yeah.
It's too anesthetic.
Yeah. Or if the music's too noisy, you can't talk. You know, pubs are for talking. They're not for going in and listening to.
I'm not adverse to having a TV or having sports, obviously, because I like watching my sports. But yeah, the sound, but the light, I'd never thought of that. So it makes sense. But you do. You want it cozy. You don't want it bright. All right. Thank you. That's good. Another quote time. Here we go. Well, maybe. The last time. Nope. Yeah, right there. Oop. You state, the last time I checked, there is no correlation between the quality of whiskey made at the distillery. So we're going from pub to distillery, but we're getting back on course. And any aesthetic values one could give to the building. Going back to page 26. So I'm wondering if you, like me, are influenced by your environment while drinking whiskey. I enjoy a whiskey better depending on my mood and people around me, but also on the scenery. And I didn't really realize that till later, where I'd be in the Rocky Mountains and drinking a whiskey and you had the view, and that imprinted on me. So, and maybe I liked it more because of that. Maybe they didn't deserve all the praise, but they got it. And at the time it felt right. So I'm wondering if you're kind of in that same.
Oh, absolutely. It's you've only got 5 senses, haven't you? So if you're drinking and you've got a couple of foxes screwing behind you, that's probably going to put you off your dram because it's not a pleasant noise. If you're drinking it, you've got a skunk, letting one off near you, that's going to ruin it. And if you're drinking and in front of you is a tip, a skip or something, I think there's a reason above and beyond the conviviality of festivals, and I mean location wise. There's a reason why people go to Campbelltown, why they go to Islay, why they go to Speyside, because the greatest dram, glass of wine, beer you'll ever have will be in situ, will be at the location. And there is a magic about it. And in my first book, I actually wrote about Bunnahabhain sitting on the pier. I think I said I sat on the pier with my feet in the water. I got my piers mixed up because John McClellan, who sadly is no longer with us, he wrote to me very kindly. He said, "You must have 8-meter long legs or something, because that's the only way you can sit on our pier and put your feet in the water." But anyway, I was it was a beautiful day, sat on the pier drinking Bunnahabhain 10, and you buy a bottle and you bring it home. And you go, "Where's all that magic gone?" It was magical. Ethereal. It was magical. It was a revelatory experience. But that's not their fault. You can't bottle magic. So yes, I'm definitely with you. It's a mood at home. It's a mood thing. What mood am I in? But when you're there, I mean, drinking with Connell and Graham at Ardnamurchan was nearly religious. It's sitting with Annabelle at Nutneen with sunshine bathing my back. She was squinting. It was bathing my back, looking over towards Tobermory. Nutneen's suddenly the greatest whiskey you've ever had in your entire life. And if she could bottle that, people wouldn't buy Macallan anymore. They'd buy Nutneen. So all of these things, I'm completely. Yeah. It's impossible. But the idea of having a dram in the Rockies, wow, yeah. I mean, that's bucket list for me. That would be. I love mountains.
Well, you've got a place to stay. And if it's not here, it's with Graham. You've got lots of places really close by. But this came to the forefront for me when I was I was reading the book. But when you were in this area, I think you were talking about the ferry coming in. You could see the ferry coming in, and you were at anyways. There's several places where you describe the scenery and what you see as you're having the whiskey, and you sold it. You did it very well, and so I wanted to be there at that time.
That was Harris, where I heard a noise in the morning and stuck my head out the window, and the ferries, the guys coming straight in, doing the rope, and you could wave at him. You could wave at him from the bathroom window of this hotel. So it was because I'd arrived at night, I hadn't realized how close everything in Harris. What's the town?
The hotel owned by the same people at the distillery, though, is correct?
No, it's a separate business. Yeah. Separate.
Okay. Well, and because that was coming up, and I was thinking when some owners have all the capital to put on everything, to include everything at the same time, the tour, the cafe, the restaurant, maybe the hotel. I was thinking about the overall experience. And there's others that don't. They have enough to open and start making spirit. And I'm wondering, does it feel like the whiskey is number one when you're opening up an experience as opposed to the whiskey? And I'm just saying that because most of those in Canada that open up their distillery, they don't have the tasting room and the anything. They really don't add to the experience. It's not beautiful, it's functional, but they're focusing on the whiskey. So I didn't know if you could have both and often. Do you see that?
Yeah. It was quite marked how different each place was financed. Some were on a shoestring. Glasgow, none of these were on a shoestring, but Glasgow, they had to get up quickly. So being linked to a bonded warehouse helped them. They're in an area of Glasgow that doesn't get tourists. Really doesn't get tourists. And it suits them fine for the spirit they make. Yes, they would absolutely love to have a visit. It would be one of the most visited distilleries if they could find a way of doing it. I'm sure Mike will one day, because that's his plan. Whereas others were built with a view of visitors almost first and foremost, and Harris will be a good example of that. They put together a very clever package of distillery first, gin second, whiskey third. And in no way does that belittle any of the quality of those three things, because their gin is exceptional and their whiskey is exceptional too. But very, very different funding. And in fact, in their example, it's interesting that the gin was so successful, it allowed them to hold on to their whiskey for quite a bit longer. Others couldn't dream of doing that. And that really is testament to Simon and his team at Harris, who with such experience and such expertise were able to absolutely nail, and the right time for gin. They did that now, no chance. But back then, phenomenal planning and timing and everything. So it was marked how different each was. Glenwivis is another good example. They would be desperate to have people come along, but they don't have the funds, and they're still having difficulties with the neighbor who was one of the original founders. Difficult for people to get up the hills as well, but God, if they could do it, what a place that will be. Our beekeeper,
they have to redo the road. I think that was another one of the roads that scared me. Going,
and put a chairlift in from Dingwall or something.
That'd be great.
That might be easier.
And maybe skiing in the wintertime on the side.
Yeah.
Any elevation? Does snow actually stay there?
I think it would do. Yeah, I think they would get snow up there. They're pretty high up.
Okay.
Yeah, so very, very, very different. All of them. Dornoch, another one, absolute shoestring. The guys did it with pooling money together and built the ugliest, tiniest, most ramshackle distillery, but make one of the best whiskies, one of the most exciting pair of distillers there are in the market. So it was incredible, the juxtaposition of all these guys, how different they were. Torvig, billionaire owner, but has been built to provide employment, to bring tourism, and to make a stunning whiskey. And the guy's been there like 2 or 3 times. So quite a different makeup between all of them. But I don't think any of them ever. I think they all set out to make the best whiskey they could make. Even if their point of difference maybe has challenged the market. And there's a couple of them who have made spirits that might be considered unique or different, but the market hasn't quite caught on to that flavor profile. And it might take them a long time to either change that or to get enough mature stocks. So very, very, very different feel at each of these places.
Okay. And maybe that's a conversation we're going to continue later when we talk about the whiskey regions and maybe how it diverges too much or whatever. So let's go with that. And let's continue. And I'm going to talk about the gray article, so the standalone ones again. So I'm going to ask you about a couple of these, I think. And again, when I say gray articles, it's the ones like that for people to look on to. So this one's on page 53. So, and it's called Types of Whiskey Drinkers. So while reading this, you told me that I was part of the obsessed 1%, and that I'm both a collector and a completionist, which is nice to know. As much as the introspection that resulted in these pages, I appreciated this too. This one comment made me think. When I die, I hope my partner does not sell my collection for the amount I told them it cost. So I just thought that was really funny. However, I do tell my wife, she has a very good idea as to how much I spend. But I'm wondering about you. What would you want to happen with your book and your whiskey collection? Because this is coming to the forefront with me, because there's a lot of people out there that collected whiskeys over the past 10 years when it got, or 15, when it got more interesting, I guess, and more popular. People were buying things that they thought they could sell later. And I'm seeing a lot of people trying to sell collections and not making what they thought they were going to make. So they have the collection at the end. They're going to keep it. I know what I want to do with my collection at the end, but I want to know what you would do with your books. And because you have a lot of books on that side of you. And I'm guessing some fairly nice whiskeys as well. So what do you think is going to happen?
Well,
you will.
a lot of my whiskeys are for drinking, and I turn 50 next year, so a lot of them will get opened. I'm hoping to have a big get all the whiskey buddies together and pop these corks and then have one of the world's most expensive bottle banks the next day, because whiskey is for drinking. But at the same time, because when I came into this industry, there wasn't a huge amount of the products that have really interested me. So, for example, I've still yet to see what I believe is a genuine Campbelltown malt from the 19th century, and I would love to see, even if it was empty bottles, I would love to see them, how they looked, what the distiller was trying to portray with them. You can see the odd label, and I've got 2 in the book that's coming out, but it doesn't say anything. It's just a little, like a logo, really. So I think, some of my stuff I may pass on to my son and say, these aren't for drinking. Keep hold of them, and maybe they're for your son and maybe for his son. I will get no heirlooms from my family, very, very working class. My dad got nothing off his dad. My mum got very little off her parents. I think it would be fun, some of this stuff, because a lot of it I've drunk. I know what it tastes like, so I don't need to. There's no fear of missing out on the flavor. But then a lot of it is, there for what was it? A friend of mine used to call it deferred consumption. It is there for opening one day. And I'm kind of glad that prices are dropping, because now you can drink it with less guilt.
So bad. Yep. Well, the birthday is perfect, the 50th birthday. Mine's 56 next, so it's not a big important birthday. I still need birthday bottles. I still need to find stuff that was distilled in 1969. I found them, but the prices are coming down, so I don't want to spend $10,000. I don't.
Well,
I don't want the family cask from Glenfarclas from 16. But you have a lot of books too, though, and you started collecting those in university. If I think we talked about that.
Yeah, that's right.
So you should have a lot of really cool books as well. And for me, I said my family should take some. I've collected ones that are on their birthdays, so they'll have those. There's others that I think are fairly important. I have friends that if they survive after me, I think I'd like to gift some of those. But beyond that, I'm Irish, and I think I want a heck of a wake. I really do. It's like, remember me, and I want to hear, as I'm hovering over, all the bad stories, all the funny things that had happened in the past, and there's quite a few, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I think my feeling on the books are that when I was buying them I started buying in 96, 97. Had people not been selling them, I wouldn't have been able to amass this collection, which has helped me through my career. And assuming that my son has no interest in whiskey, I've not pushed him, he's free to do whatever he wants. Assuming he has no interest in whiskey in the future, I think it would be nice when I'm no longer needing these, even if it's within my lifetime, sort of like a David Gilmour thing, selling his guitars off, that the next young idiot like me coming along who falls in love with whiskey and is not just interested in the product but the history of it, can buy these books to then further their knowledge, career, whatever. And I do have some quite rare books like Ross Wilson's Scotch, which is a mammoth book. Things like that, they're very, very hard to find these days. Oh geez. It would be fun, as I said, for somebody to come along and make use of this stuff. So that would be my thought. Books aren't like whiskey, that they can be used again and again and again. So my hope is that maybe somebody else. It's funny. Somebody has died recently in Scotland, and they must have had one of the biggest libraries in Scotland. The whole thing went up for sale in a auction house. And I looked through the whole lot, because a huge amount of it was Scottish interest, hoping for, tours of the Western Isles or of Kintyre, of Hebrides or whatever.
Okay. Yeah.
And there was nothing. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books I went through, hoping for, maybe an original Bernard, all these kind of things that you hope to find. Yeah. And no, it was all geological and metallurgical and sword fighting and ancient battles, and so much of it now has been superseded by better research and things like that. But what a collection! And you think that guy spent his life amassing, I'm assuming it's a man, amassing this library, and thousands of books in total, thousands and thousands, and first editions of H.G. Wells and all this other stuff, and just incredible. So all this is transitory. We hold on to it for just that little while, and then somebody else gets it. So. But I tell you what's more fun for me is the idea that in 100 years somebody might be looking back and what independent bottlers were like, and here's an archive of what that's more interesting, and I have it in my head of the things that Barnard missed. So when I'm writing the Campbelltown book, I'm thinking, what do people actually want to know? And I make a little bit of fun about him of some of the stuff he records. So
well, you're closer to the industry of people and what they want. So you're not writing this for yourself, really. You're
a journal. What he was writing. Yeah.
But you know what they want, and you're in the business, and you've been giving people what they want and making money off of that. As an independent bottler, that's what you did. You had to think, what do people want? So I think that's just your mindset. I think that's just a natural occurrence for you. Right?
Give the people what they want. Yeah.
And for me, with my books, I have a lot of whiskey books. Harder to come by here, obviously, in Canada than they are there. But I don't know, because I write all over my books. When I have the book, I write. So when my children do get them, if they want them, they'll see my thoughts as and how deep and dark they are, and
that's kind of cool too. I like
they'll see a little space of Dad that maybe they didn't see before. All right, let's talk about the regions. We touched about the regions a second ago, so I'll find one of my quotes with regions. And your article in there in Scotch whiskey regions, you said, here we go. Well, some of the newer distilleries, such as Clydeside and Kilchoman, have reveled in being part of a region. Meanwhile, others such as Rasse, help me.
Yeah.
Rasse and Inchdarney have found the regionalization confusing, limiting, controlling, and erroneous. So back to page 40 for that. Now, you later state as well that you believe regions to be a lazy way of lumping distilleries together. And I agree, but I'm wondering, could you still use region determination for the traditional distilleries? Maybe it only works for the Diageos, for the Moet Henny Louis Vuittons. Maybe it works very well for them, and that's why the Scotch Whisky Association is still promoting that. I'm wondering.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that it is a mix. There's no way you would subcategorize Islay or Campbelltown. You wouldn't say Glen Scotia because it's in Dallentober is a Dallentober style whiskey, and Springbank and Glengyle are Campbelltown. So you can't. And in fact, I think that the title of that article is Reductio ad absurdum, which I've pinched from a guy called Nicholas Morgan, who wrote an article on it, who said, we can't, you cannot split to the point of near infinity, because it would become silly. So
I was going to pick his books out to show Nick.
A long stride. Yeah, I've got it here, which is a quite brilliant book, to be honest. That one there.
And I was going to do that with him, hopefully at the Banff Whiskey Experience, doing this, what we're doing with him with that book, because Johnny Walker gives a lot of money to them. So I was hoping to bring him here to do that with them. So
he covers a lot in here, so you'll have a lot of questions. No, it's a brilliant book. It's been very helpful, and Nick's been very helpful on the Campbelltown book.
Nice. Good.
But his point, and it's quite correct, is that with all these new distilleries, take Harris for instance. Do we just lump it in as an island? Can you? They're out. They're miles away from Arran, for instance. And is Arran a highland or a lowland? All these things. But at the same point, to have the Highland-Lowland line, which wasn't even a splitting of regions, it was a tax line.
Yeah.
To have that today seems very pointless, really, very, very silly. The whole of the Highlands being a single region. Ben Nevis doesn't taste a thing like Cragganmore. Let's not have this as in fact, that's where Spacer came from, to split that area up. But I like the new writer that will talk about Fife being a region, because it is, and removing it from that Highland Lowland line. And most of the Fife distillers want that too. They would like a Fife region. And I think we could maybe get to something like Hebridean being a region, Isla being a region, Campbelltown, the border counties, maybe the Central Belt, those kind of things. But it's still a little bit lazy, because the idea that Glasgow tastes like Holyrood, well, nobody knows what Holyrood tastes like. Not even Holyrood knows what Holyrood tastes like. So we can't have
their first three bottles, and the difference between the first and the third bottle is it's markedly different. So
yeah, I agree. And I think they're a great example, because they're kind of saying, what we're going to take this idea that you can regionalize us, and we're just going to stick two fingers up at it, and not in a bolshy sort of look at us attitude, but in a we can and we will, and we're going to make mistakes, and we're going to do great things. And Glasgow are the same. They make 3 completely different styles of whiskey at the one distillery. How can you regionalize that? You know, their closest distillery, Clydeside, isn't anything like their whiskey. So I don't like this idea where you can say the lowland malts are the girly malts. You know, if you're starting in whiskey, drink a lowland malt. First of all, that's quite sexist. And second of all, that's absolute rubbish, because Annandale doesn't taste like Bladnoch, which doesn't taste like Borders, you know, all these things. So that was my sort of thrust. There are people who want to retain it within the industry, who think it's very prim and proper. And I think a lot of the new breed, the new pioneering spirits, are saying, hang on a minute, it's had its day, it's a bit pastiched, it's a bit done, let's move on. So
all right, so it's there, we're going to accept it for what it is. It's there.
It's not changing yet,
but well, and a lot of nice maps with them, so you see the distilleries in the area. And I've just been referring to maps a lot, trying to pick out the distilleries I'm going to see when I go there this summer. So it's helpful, but not. It's not helpful if you're expecting it to taste like that. And maybe it's just us. We'll accept it, but when we do tastings, or when we're tasting with friends, we just have to talk about the whiskey and what we taste and what's on the palate, and not where it's from. So
exactly,
that's it. I had another one. Sorry, another article. So it's page 95, and I tried to take a picture of this so I could actually just blow it up, but it's there. If you can see it. And you don't like your pictures. You say that you weren't taking very good pictures, and you were apologizing for them a lot. But I think they're fantastic. You did a good job.
Well, at first I wanted to get a professional photographer, and then I started taking these photos, and I was talking to people, and they said, "Well, your photos are fine, and they look really good. And the point is, if you with an iPhone camera can take these photos, someone who's arty and can actually take photos, imagine what they're gonna, they're gonna look at these and go, oh man, I'm gonna have a field day with these places because they're just so amazing." Funnily enough, I've cheated with that photo. I'll let you into a little secret. Okay. So that is actually Middleton in Ireland.
Okay.
That's my photo of one of their enormous racked warehouses in Ireland. And the point of and I like, obviously, the bit you sent me, you had your 3 points or so about why I've included that. The reason I've written that piece and then added that photo and said, can you spot your cask, is I'm trying to remove the romantic view of people buying these casks thinking they're sat in a dunnage warehouse and they can go up and look at it and stroke it. The vast majority of all casks are racked head to toe deep in these warehouses, and the losses of these can be colossal, because heads are the worst leaking part of a cask. But what they can do is they can offset it by how many casks they can get into a warehouse. Right. So they don't care about the losses, because warehouses are expensive. A warehouse of this size might be £3 or £4 million. If you can maximize how many casks go in there, suddenly the losses of the whiskey, which is only costing you, I don't know, £1 a litre to make, something like that, they don't care. No. And if your cask is buried deep and it's dripping away on a cask end, a drip will empty itself within 3 months, 4 months, a steady drip. So my point is, before you think about buying these casks from these guys selling casks, and I am not talking about the distillery selling casks. They're very, if you go to Harris, and I think I've got a picture in the book of their casks, it's beautiful. And they have somebody whose job it is to make sure they're not leaking. And what a fantastic thing to have bought, to go there to see it. They look amazing. Your name's on it. I'm talking about these guys who have rocked up and are selling casks that you'll never see. You don't even have proof they exist, and they could be stacked like that, dripping away, and you lose everything.
Forever.
So it was me just sort of saying, caveat emptor, maybe get some advice, talk to somebody like me. I'll do it for free, before you do all that. But anyway, yeah, that's my little cheat there for you. I was trying to find a warehouse that demonstrated how many casks. I mean, and I think these are 16 pallets deep each side.
Really?
Yeah. So you've got 9 on a pallet. You've got 9 times 16 doubled, and then every single row. And there's 20, 30 rows. And that's one warehouse. Okay. So I just wanted to remove. There you go. I mean, isn't that gorgeous? Absolutely stunning. If I owned a cask, that's how I wanted it.
Yeah. I was talking to Davin Kurgamo about that as well. And when it first came out, when people were first starting here in Canada anyways, selling their casks. So let's go maybe 10, 15 years ago for most of the distilleries that opened. How did you know that was your cask? And he said, you have to make sure you go there, you sign your cask, you do something like that. And you just brought that up. You see your signature, and you can visit it and pet it, have a little taste year after year, decide when it's ready. That's fine. It really is. But you have to know it's yours as well, and not something that maybe they've switched out with someone else because maybe they want to use this in one of their single malts somehow. So lots of good that can happen with it, and there's still things you have to care about. So talk to someone like you that's been around the industry before you start sinking 6,000 pounds into something and 10,000 pounds into something else. Well,
I would say, if it isn't the distillery selling you the cask, go get some free advice from people like myself and Mark Littler and Philippe Schreiberg and all these other people. They'll do it for free. They're there for you. But if it's a distillery selling it to you, well, you know where they are. They're hardly gonna cause a problem.
And they're not going to pick up and take off with your cask either.
And also, if your cask is leaking, they're going to be they don't want stories like that getting out. So they're gonna be helpful to you. So that would be my advice. Don't buy one of these fly by night companies. Buy it from go get a Harris if they're doing it. Get a Nickneen, get a Ardnamurchan, whoever's selling them. There's some great stuff out there. That would be my advice.
Ardnamurchan, definitely. They're lovely.
Yeah.
Okay. Back to the book. When you're going from distillery to distillery, you're meeting the owner, you're meeting the blender, the distillers. But you talked about the tour guides or the tours that you had, and at all 25 distilleries. And have you noticed this distinct difference between these individuals and how they present the information and the gigantic Diageo corporate tours that you go on? Do you see a difference between them? And I'm sure you've been on enough of both that you can compare.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, there are quite a few I visited that don't do tours, but of those that do, the personal touch that you get, it's small groups. I was slightly off season as well, so I was quite lucky there. And that is actually a piece of advice I'd give. If Scotland's fantastic in May, go in May. Don't go in July, August. Go in May. Yeah, I don't know why. Look at the pictures of the distilleries. That was all April, May. And we had a terrible summer. But it's the personal level, and some of the nicest tours I had were where just simple things happen. Nickneen, they start you with a hot drink, so a cup of tea, cup of coffee. Okay. You're sat in a cafe, and there's a guy's named Quentin, I think. He just came, sat on the table, and he went around the room. So, where are you from? Why are you here? All these things. And granted, Clydeside can't do that when they get 100,000 people coming through their doors a year. Right. But at the same time, they have tailored by adding bits of the history of Glasgow and explaining why they have chosen the route they're doing and the look they've got and everything, and the family history, which is really, really important. So they're all quite different in their approach. I think sadly some of the bigger guys have people that are a bit too transient. They're not, maybe they're there for a few weeks, a few months, and they're just regurgitating facts. I recently retoured Springbank again because I, funnily enough, even working there, you don't tour it when you work there. Okay. And the guy, the tour guide was Finley. He was a local, and he was free to just be himself. And it was one of the nicest tours I've ever had because he was just hilarious, and he was, you know, do you want to see this? You won't want to see this, you know, all that. No, I'd love to see it. Right. Okay, up we go. And, you know, all the way at the top. Now, they're a different beast because they really do embrace the visitor. Whereas some places, that's off limits. You can't go in there. Springbank's more or less, look, if you're with if the guide wants to bring you in, we'll bring you in, assuming that health and safety don't mind it. So, yeah, very, very different. Yeah, quite different beasts, all of them. Some geared up specifically for tours like King's Barnes because they're built near the Gulf. So they're used to people bussing in and big groups going around. And others like Nickneen might be never bigger than 5-6 people at a time, where Quentin, as I said, can sit and chat. And after the tour, you get a piece of cake. I mean, how nice is that? You know, so yeah, they've thought about it. There's Annabelle who owns Nickneen has sat down and thought, what do I want when I do a tour? I don't want to be hammered with facts and figures. And frankly, you finish the tour, and this is why I don't put them in the book, because you finish the tour, and if the mash tun takes 5 tons, is that the bit you're taking away with you from Scotland? You know, it's not important, but you might take away, oh, you know what, that ginger cake they gave me, and the way Quentin was describing how he got the job, that's the interesting bit, you know. So that would be my advice to all these guys, is that and a couple of them are quite guilty of this, of just regurgitating facts. Most people on these tours don't give a monkey's about how many tons of barley you get through and how hot your 4 waters are and all this stuff. Yeah. There are a few who do, and I'm sure they'll ask the question, but the rest of us really don't care. You know, make it far more personal. Tell the family story. Tell the history. Why was it built? What were you going to do? And don't take yourselves too seriously. That's really important.
Perfect. Yeah. I like it. Well, and I plan on going to quite a few of them, but again, it's in July, and I'm a teacher, so I have no choice. That's one of them. Yeah. And the higher prices in July is going to be worse, and the midges are going to be worse in July as well, I'm told. But let's get back to the book. And another thing you describe is going from distillery to distillery are the people who work it. And so this is great for the local economy because you're bringing in capital, tourists, and you're bringing in jobs. So thinking about the jobs, the people they're hiring, though, are not always from the industry, or they're not from they haven't graduated from Harriet Watt or something like that. So you do have some industry people who have come in, and you have others that have no experience within the industry. And I'm wondering, did you see a commonality somehow? Who would have done that type of thing? Those that are moneyed are bringing those in, those that are not bringing someone else. And if they don't have these people from the industry, are they kicking themselves? Is it hard to find a brewer or distiller and keep them and make sure they're good? And how long extra does it take time-wise to train them, type thing?
Yeah, it was a good mix. It was a very good mix of taking some of the brightest and best from the Harriet Watt brewing and distilling program, and a very good mix of local people, local jobs, which for me was the most important part of this tour. I live in a very local rural community, very, very small. And if a distillery was built here and they brought people in, I would be very upset, because there's people here looking for work who are quite easily trainable. Not to all positions, but enough. But the amount that you went to where it was locals, I mean, Torre Vague make a huge point of hiring locally. And Glenwivis, it's all locals that deal with it. Harris, incredibly important to them. That was their raison d'etre to build Harris, was for local employment. And it's amazing the people that have come back. Shona, who's the blender, came back to Harris and is now their chief blender. I mean, she couldn't be a better ambassador for Harris. You won't find a better one if you tried. So it was a really good mix, but it is interesting how much can be trained. So whilst I wouldn't ever want anybody to ever stop doing the Heriot Watt brewing and distilling course, because that is always a foot up, the amount of guys who were doing the job without it, who had trained on the job, and a few guys who were telling me that when these graduates would come in, they more or less had to unlearn them a bit, if that makes sense,
Okay.
re-educate them. So that's all well and good from your textbooks, but in the real world, if you don't do this, or if you do this, and I won't mention any names, but definitely one of the guys was, he a little bit less enamored with what was being taught at these distilleries. It's all well and good learning. Once you're there, it's a practical thing, isn't it? It's like you can read a book on how to play football, but until you're out on the pitch with the ball, it's a different beast. So there was a really, really good mix, and I really loved the fact that you had guys like myself, male, female, who were just passionate about the industry and had maybe been working in a shop, had maybe been a tour guide, had maybe been a salesman or a brand ambassador, who were now distillery managers. Best example, Darren McCormick, who's now distillery manager at Lockleigh. He was a tour guide at Annandale, and he's just hugely, hugely passionate about the industry, about Dumfries and Galloway and Ayrshire, Lowland Scotland, about employment, about pushing this product and making sure it's the best it can be. And that was a really nice thing to see, because I think sometimes the industry can lose its way with where it comes from. It forgets it is a cottage industry. It forgets that it is a fourth, fifth generation, and that if something catastrophic happened to the whiskey industry, the Isle of Islay would lose almost all of its employment. It would end up being I was going to say school teachers, but what I mean is it would end up all being people paid by the government, is what I meant to say. Yeah. Which is no good if no income's coming in, if people are leaving in droves, which is what happened before. One of the quotes I've got in the book is from Graham, what was his name? Is it Ormond Lag, who said, the threat of the teachers to the kids in the 80s was, if you don't do well at school, you'll end up working at the distillery. Can you imagine that being a threat? Now it's, you better do well at school or you won't get a job at the distillery.
I read that. I was thinking, that's not me. I would have said something very different.
Yeah, but it wouldn't have stopped me bunking off, I tell you. I think that's been the greatest pleasure of the entire tour, was how local these things, they've become the epicenter of their communities. They've become pride of place. They've become something that the locals will talk about. Going to Hoyk, which I'd never been to before, I went into a shop and was chatting to them. Oh, you must go to Borders Distillery. I said, well, and I've just come from there. And I thought, isn't that lovely that you walk into just a mini supermarket and they're so proud of what John and his team have done there. And you kind of drive through these places in Scotland and you think, could you imagine what would happen to that community if somebody had built a Torre Vague, or if somebody had built a Knockneen? I mean, the very best example is Rassie. What Alistair and William have done on Rassie is a miracle. And I'm not religious.
Yes.
Exactly, yeah. It's 1 out of every 5 people works for the distillery on that island. Tourism has gone from a few thousand to, what did he have? 35, 40,000 people. I mean, it's incredible. Wow. And that's why I say he's the hardest working person in the industry. But all of these things, it's bringing these communities together. It's a focal point. It's bringing money in, which is really important. And I do stress in the book that some of their products are a bit more expensive, but you're not just buying a 12-year-old whiskey, because they're not 12. You're buying Julia, who works in the mashing house, but lives on the island, and Stephen, who does it. You're buying them. You're buying bits of them every time you buy this whiskey. Some of it's too expensive, and I get if you don't want to buy it, but it has to be that little bit more money, because these are all petit chateaux. These are all tiny communities, and you are literally paying for the fuel that takes their children to school, all these things which will build the next community. So yeah, it was a hugely gratifying tour in that respect, hugely.
Okay. And I like how you put that, little parts of the community into that. I like that. And we support it here as well. Our small distilleries in Canada, we're buying a bottle and it might be 8 years old, and I'm paying 100 Canadian for it. And for 100 Canadian, I can get a 15-year-old Scotch. And people make that comparison all the time. It's like, why am I doing this if I can get that? And I really do try to promote Canadian whiskeys, and especially those that are trying to make a go of it. You have to spend it. You have to do it. But I like the community thought to it. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
However, talking about community, there's one community that you didn't seem to like all that much. So Montrose. And it surprised me because everything was very positive about everything until Montrose and the seagulls and the pooping. And I'm wondering if there's a reason, because I'm going to Montrose. So Pip Hills from SMWS lives there. So I'm stopping in on him, and we're going to have a dram in Montrose. I'm wondering if you had food poisoning, your car broke down,
that's my mistake. I should have reached out to Pip and got a personal tour of Montrose. I think actually if I'd been braver, I would have had more Bill Bryson in the book and really talked about, like for instance, the first and last town in Scotland is Gretna and Thurso.
Okay.
Is that what Wolfburn is? Yeah, Thurso. So they're the first and last, first city you come to, or first town, and the last town if you drive all the way up through the middle. And they've got a phenomenally familiar feel to them, to have some bit of alliteration there. And I really wanted to sort of say, isn't it awful to bookend the country with two quite depressing places? But the problem is, the team at Wolfburn are the best. They're just Mark and all of them. They're so fantastic. And I would literally be insulting the place they come from as an Englishman, which is a double whammy. I don't have that in Montrose, so I was allowed to be a little bit rude of Montrose. But it is the high street is desperate. It is a desperate high street, as so many are. My local Dumfries, the high street is desperate. And Dumfries and Montrose again have a very familiar feel to them. They're lacking the Ian Palmers, the Annabelles. They're lacking all these people. And as I said, if even Arbiki, which is not in Montrose, it's quite a bit outside of Montrose, the two couldn't be more juxtaposed. They literally, Arbiki is like walking into something you would expect a Californian vineyard to look like. It is just spectacular. It's beautiful. Whereas Montrose is the town that fishing forgot. And I think maybe what put me on edge was I went in to see the local pro at the golf shop. I was already annoyed because I should have gone and played the golf course. And I said, I want to go for a drink. He goes, oh, well, you want, I think it was called the 19th hole or whatever. It was the nearest pub to the golf course. And it was not a good pub. It wasn't good at all. So I sat there having a drink. And again, it was bright. It was noisy. The beers were exactly what you've seen everywhere else. All the things that I don't like. But I'm sure
everything in that town. How can you suggest this to me? Put me in.
I'm sure Pip will show you a completely different Montrose, and I think he's coming to our festival on the 15th. So I'll maybe go up and say, look, if you've read this book, I apologize for what I said about your town, but maybe he's a golfer. He likes sailing, so that's probably why he lives there. He's got his boat, hasn't he? Well, so yeah, I apologize to people of Montrose, but I there was too much in the thing that got me really going at first was when I was looking up things to do, and the third best thing to do was go see a statue of a dog. Now it is a phenomenal dog, and as a Canadian, you'll get it because he is an amazing dog.
And there's a picture of it. You put that in there. That's good.
Bums, the Norwegian dog.
I'll find it.
So that was ahead of the distillery was going to see this statue of a dog.
But I found it funny. It was terribly funny because you're very positive about everything, and then all of a sudden, boom! It's like, woo!
I think if I had more about me. If I was more courageous, I think the book would have been, because Bill Bryson, when he goes through England, is absolutely cutting. I mean, he tears my compatriots apart, but we are very good at taking that on the chin. I live here. He wrote that living in America. You know, then he had to come back and do it again. I don't know if I could get away with it as much because the industry is so nice. If I'd gone around and really allowed my devious dry wit to come through, I might have been persona non grata at a few places. So I had to cut a fine line of being funny without people getting very precious about where they come from and things. So.
Well, I don't think Pip will take too much offense to a conversational piece with them too. So
he'll probably agree with me, you know.
Yeah.
And I did think it was quite funny that one statue was absolutely covered with shit and one wasn't. That was just quite funny to me. Book ended the high street.
I have a couple more pages, but you know, I've had you for an hour and a half, so I'll leave this with my last question because I had just done Mike Billett's Peat and Whiskey, so this question goes with that, and then I'll open this up if there's anything you didn't want to talk about or didn't talk about yet that we can bring back. But so this
brilliant
is my last question. It's fantastic. So in relation to Ardnahoe Distillery, you quoted Fraser Hughes as saying this: "We are producing a peated spirit. It's incredible how water from here enhances the whiskey." And right when I read that, I'm going, whoa, the water enhances it. And then because Mike talks about that too. But anyways, we've got peated water mixed with peated malted barley, and the softness of the water gives an outstanding smooth balance to our fruit forward and smoky whiskey. That's page 201. Now, you've read that book, obviously. And Peat and Whiskey, The Unbreakable Bond, I should say the whole title. Do you agree with this assessment that the peated water has no effect on peatiness of the whiskey? And maybe the peated water has a different, because he didn't say that the peat had an influence on it. He said, we've got peated water mixed with malted barley, the softness of the water. So maybe not the peat itself adding to it or the softness. So I just want to know where you stood with that.
I will always bow to Mike's knowledge on peat because he's the expert, quite frankly. And he's a very, very, very nice guy and was very helpful. The piece I did, the article I did on peat, I got him to read. He wrote back on a part of it and he said, yeah, it's not how I'd put it. So I knew I had to rewrite that bit. But Mike's a great guy. And at the same time, I will bow to Fraser Hughes, who is, you know, one of the most experienced distillery managers in the industry and knows how to make bloody good whiskey. And I think they're both right. I think that the phenols coming through it in some of the waters make no difference whatsoever because the water's treated to a point where the phenols can't get through. And at the same time, if the water isn't special, then we don't need distilleries in different locations. So I think a big chunk of why Campbelltown whiskey is the way it is because of the water they get from the Crosshill Lock. Big chunk.
Sure.
I can't quantify it. I can't give any science behind it. I don't want to. I'm not a science guy. It's not my thing. But the reason why you've got, what is it now, 9 distilleries on Islay, all making a completely different whiskey. Some of that's technical know-how and what they're doing, but some of it is good old-fashioned, you know, fairy dust, I think. And I think location and water and the peat it goes through and everything makes a difference. It has to. Otherwise, as I said, we'd all be Rosal.
Okay.
So I'll bow. And that's probably why I allowed it as a statement without any counterfactual, because you know, with no argument. I am not someone who can argue with Fraser Hughes on the technicalities of. I mean, the stuff he was telling me was blowing my mind of what they did at Ardnahoe, and yet again, when I read Mike's book and talk to Mike, you know, again, it's fascinating the story of this piece of Jurassic flora and fauna that makes such a difference to the industry. So I can't, with those things, it would take somebody more technically minded with probably PhDs and many letters behind their names to challenge both. But I'm going to go with Mike's right and Fraser's right.
And I'm squarely in the middle, and I'll bow to either of them when I'm talking.
I like them both equally.
I said I'd only give you one question. I'm going to give you a second one. Sorry, this right here. Tell us about this, please, because you know what? I saw that recently, I think a week ago, and we're not that book, about this book. So tell me about this. And
so I tell you what's funny is that the day I was interviewed for this new movie is the day that book landed in the house. So but I wasn't allowed to put it on camera. I'm blaming Guy for that one. So yes, this is a 4-part series from the guys who made the Water of Life movie, which was predominantly about Buricladi. They have made a 4-part series on independent bottling, which is unique to the Scotch whisky world. Pretty much unique, certainly in its history and its depth. So director Guy Satchwell, who's a very good friend of mine now, he has gone around all of the independent bottlers over a number of years, interviewing all the characters that we know and love, and trying to get a story of what makes these people tick, how do they exist, why do consumers buy it, all this kind of stuff. So we've got a 4-part series, and I forget how they've split them up, but we've got like history, we've got the SMWS, we've got the future, all these kind of things in there. Be a fascinating premiere, a fascinating movie. It'll come out in streaming at some point, but that is a festival on the 15th of March that we've organized to premiere this 4-part series, and it's a whiskey festival as well with just independent bottlers. First time that's ever really been done in Scotland, a proper big festival. So we have something like 42 different independent bottlers coming, and we are well over 300 tickets sold for people too. So the premiere is nearly sold out, but there are still tickets for the festival. So and I think you get a download code for the film if you buy a ticket for the festival, so you can watch it anyway. But yeah, it looks amazing.
How much are you on camera?
I don't know, to be honest. A bit. I say they've interviewed so many people. Charlie MacLean's in there, and you've got quite a few other writers and respected authorities. Sekinder's in there. It's very difficult to get him on film, but he's in there. Mark Rainier's in there a bit from his Murray McDavid days, and then you've got all the cats. Ian Crouch is in there. Adrian Hoos. Mark and Kate Watt are in there. So all the crazy cats, all the cool gang. Alex Bruce, of course, can't have an independent bottling without Alex Bruce. And I'll have missed a whole host of people because there's just so many. But it'll be fascinating. They'll all give a very similar feel, but I think we'll have nuances and feel from different people about direction and things. And they talk a bit about the future. And don't forget, this was made over a period of time where the world has gone from it's been very, very easy to sell to now it's getting a little bit more difficult. So quite a hard thing for them to juggle in many ways, but it should be an amazing event. I'm looking forward to it. I'll be busy. I won't enjoy it. It'll be like a wedding. I won't enjoy the day.
Yeah. Looking back, you'll have a good memory.
Yeah, looking back, I'll remember
that night. It's always the 12 o'clock afterwards.
Exactly. When the doors close and the beer's poured, I'll be a happy boy. But no, I'm looking forward to the film coming out. I think from the bits I've seen, and there are some trailers on social media, how Guy's done it is fantastic, and credit to him that he could keep up this narrative over such a long period of time. And his filming is beautiful. Some of the sets, some of the sceneries, but some of the sceneries are lovely, and a lot of in warehouse, a lot of casks sat behind. There'll be people looking at, because I'm sat in front of my other whiskey collection, and who else? I think Adrian. No, not Adrian. Someone else is sat in front of theirs, and people will be sat there going, looking at the bottles, but they're freezing the frame, looking at the bottles behind. Yeah, exactly. So
I do that.
Yeah,
I do. I like to see what's behind and what's in front. So it should be fun. I'm glad. I'll be watching it. I won't be at the festival, obviously. Although, if I was independently wealthy, wouldn't that be great? Go from one gigantic festival to another. As long as you knew people, it'd be fun. And not just the brand ambassadors, but I mean the people involved behind the scenes. So anything else you wanted to talk about, kind sir? Anything that just piqued your interest that I cut you off? Because I do that sometimes.
No, I think we're all good. I've got no idea what I'm doing after the Campbelltown book. None at all. I might take some time. I've got a lot of World War II books stacked up that I've not read. A couple of whiskey books as well that I haven't read. So, but maybe something that will come to me.
And again,
I don't know.
That's the one right there.
It'll be out in April, May. I'll hopefully be posting in April. I'll have it at the Campbelltown Whiskey Festival. So that was my deadline. So that's why I've been working like a dervish.
I think you mentioned that people could pick it up when they're buying it online. So they buy it there, and then they'll pick it up from you, and you'll sign it and give it to them.
And I'll be at the Speyside Festival too. I should have it for that too. But it did occur to me that the story of Glenlivet has never been told. So that is a possibility for the next book, because that's quite a fascinating story. Few court
do you know anyone you can contact there?
Well, I don't mean as in the distillery. I mean as in the location. So you go back to, and Graham would love this, because it's all ushers and court cases with ushers and smiths and the use of the word Glenlivet. But there's a lot of fascinating articles about all that. The court case that was massive for the industry. Without it, we wouldn't have the region of Speyside. So there's quite an interesting story to tell there. So that's a possibility. But this Campbelltown book's really taken it out of me quite a bit, because my deadline was, I've done a doctorate in about 9 months. So,
well, I'll be asking you back on here once you've caught your breath a little bit.
I'll be glad to talk about it once it's done. I'm always glad. There's something about when that arrives, when that physical thing's done. Yeah. And I know there's always a couple of errors and things, and people love pointing them out to me. But it's done. It's the record's down. It's clapping in the background. Someone's clapping in the background.
Good. Well, kind sir, thank you.
Thank you, Dolph. Pleasure.
I'm going to wrap it up. That's all the time we have. Whiskey brothers, sisters, and friends. This has been a fantastic morning, early afternoon for me. Hopefully for you as well, early evening. Thanks to the people who joined us now. And there was a few commenting on the side. Thank you. And all the ones that will do, the hundreds that always come afterwards, after they read your book and maybe checking this out. So special thanks to David Stirk, you kind sir. I'm looking forward to seeing you again with the next book. And if you're done in April, I don't know if you want to talk about it in May, June, July, August, or late in the year, but we'll get that. We'll figure that all out. But I will see everyone else here for my next interview, which is Justine Hazelhurst. We're still trying to get the dates down. So her book is Opening the Case, The Affairs of Patterson's Whiskey. You helped me out trying to get the link to her, so thank you for that. As a final note, if you don't want to miss a minute of any of these, click the like, click the subscribe, and as always, I've got a glass. You don't have a glass, but we're going to assume you have a glass there. Here's the good company. Here's the good whiskey. Here's the good conversation and slideshow. Thank you very much, one and all, and we'll see you soon.